Welcome to this explainer. We're going to dive right into the invisible, underlying psychological forces that are quietly dictating our daily behaviors and habits. If you've ever caught yourself wondering why you automatically, almost unconsciously, react a certain way to a ping on your phone, or why walking into a specific room just instantly changes your mood, well, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get right into the actual mechanics of human learning. Okay, so picture this. I want you to imagine a perfectly normal dinner date happening in March 2026. Everything's going great, totally normal, until it just unexpectedly goes wrong. The subject of this classic laboratory case study eats some contaminated seafood. Almost immediately, bam, it triggers this automatic biological defense mechanism of intense, horrible nausea. Now think about it. The meal itself, initially, totally neutral stimulus, but the psychological impact of that raw, visceral sickness does something incredibly fascinating to the brain. It triggers what we call conditioned taste aversion. Basically, that previously neutral food becomes permanently wired together with physical distress. Even though the food itself might have been harmless in the past, this intense visceral reaction shows how our biology is just hardwired to rapidly internalize environmental predictive cues. It's literally a survival mechanism to protect us in the real world, far outside the controlled walls of a laboratory.
Which brings us to Section 1, 2 types of conditioning.
As a quick refresher, let's distinguish the two foundational ways we learn. On one side, we have classical or Pavlovian conditioning, and on the other, instrumental, also known as operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is all about the internal stuff. It governs involuntary physiological reflexes based on predictive neutral signals. Instrumental conditioning, though, that shapes our complex, voluntary, goal-directed behaviors based entirely on the consequences, the rewards or punishments that actually follow our actions.
I love this quote by the famous behaviorist B.F. Skinner. He noted that the principal objective of psychology is to provide us with an entirely new understanding of the things we know best. It's a great reminder that these academic theories, they aren't just stuck in dusty textbooks. They apply directly to the everyday things we interact with constantly, especially our modern digital environments.
For example, let's look at early 2026 academic journals. They show universities systematically applying instrumental reinforcement right through a technology. They're using highly targeted smartphone push notifications to instantly award microcredentials and digital badges right after students complete their weekly online modules. These automated alerts act as incredibly powerful operant reinforcers. They're successfully driving student engagement and literally shaping voluntary study habits outside of a traditional classroom.
So, the crucial thing you've got to ask yourself is, how are these digital operant reinforcers currently dictating your own daily habits? Seriously, how does a simple little notification change the way you study, or even how you talk with your family at dinner? We are constantly being conditioned by the technology sitting right there in our pockets.
All right, moving on to Section 2, the mechanics of learning. Let's look at the math behind this.
The internal mechanics of associative learning rely heavily on this fascinating mathematical phenomenon known as prediction error. It basically dictates that conditioning only progresses when an environmental outcome defies our initial expectations. Stated simply, learning only happens when a result surprises us. As we go through repeated trials and we learn to accurately forecast the outcome, well, our baseline prediction error naturally drops.
But what happens when the environment shifts? Say you perform a learned behavior repeatedly, but you stop getting the expected reward. Well, that behavioral bond weakens. We call this extinction. Now, the absolutely crucial insight here is that this behavioral decline doesn't just erase the original memory. Actually, scratch that, the habit can unexpectedly reemerge after a brief rest period, something researchers call spontaneous recovery. The memory is there, but the active behavior itself fades away.
As Charles Darwin highlighted, survival isn't just about strength or intelligence. It's about being the most responsive to change. Mastering these underlying principles of prediction error and extinction really allows us to understand how we adapt our habits when environmental contingencies shift unexpectedly. And that brings us to a pretty severe issue currently affecting higher education. Take a look at this finding from a spring 2026 educational report looking at second-year college students dealing with severe academic burnout. Researchers found that when these students encounter an unpredictable mismatch between their extensive, grinding hard work and their final grades on high-stakes exams, it triggers massive prediction errors. They fully expected a reward for their effort, and the environment just flat-out failed to deliver it.
And the result? This lack of clear, predictable rewards causes the rapid extinction of their academic motivation. The structural bond between studying and success gets so weak that many non-traditional learners simply stop participating in study groups altogether. Their motivation has, both mathematically and psychologically, just gone totally extinct. Now, what's really interesting to think about in your own life is a time when a sudden mismatch between your effort and the outcome completely altered how you prepared for your own future. When has a total surprise or sudden change in plans fundamentally rewritten your daily behavioral routine? Let's look at how this plays out there with Section 3, Conditioning in the Real World. Out in our daily routines, classical and instrumental conditioning are constantly intertwining. Commercial marketing campaigns, for instance, they masterfully use both in a really simple two-step process. Step 1 is classical association. They pair a corporate logo with euphoria-inducing imagery so that the product independently elicits an immediate involuntary craving. Once that internal hook is set, Step 2 takes over. Operant action kicks in as you voluntarily spend your hard-earned money to purchase the product and satisfy that urge. So the involuntary craving actively drives the voluntary action. The pioneering psychologist William James emphasized that altering attitudes alters behavior. This is a profound concept, and it's something modern campus architects and planners are actively utilizing right now to help students consciously shaping their attitudes to encourage positive behaviors. We can see this in action through June 2026 news articles detailing massive campus redesigns. Colleges are actually combining relaxing lighting with academic advising areas, and they're pairing these physical spaces with highly positive social events. Essentially, they are classically conditioning first-year students to feel an involuntary sense of comfort in these spaces. And because of that, non-traditional working students are instrumentally driven to voluntarily visit these centers way more often to plan their careers. The involuntary comfort naturally increases the voluntary career planning. It's a brilliant feedback loop. So think about your own environment for a second. What specific spaces automatically trigger relaxation for you? And more importantly, how does that involuntary comfort instrumentally drive your voluntary daily routines? All right, finally, let's explore Section 4, Learning by Watching Others. Social learning theory proves that we're not just reacting to stimuli, we routinely acquire incredibly intricate behaviors simply by watching external models. But it's not as simple as just looking at someone. Successful observational learning requires 4 distinct sequential psychological processes. First is attention. You have to actively filter out distractions to actually focus on the model. Then comes retention. You must organize and store a mental representation of that event in your long-term memory. Third is reproduction, meaning you actually have to possess the physical capability to execute the behavior accurately. And finally, motivation. You got to have a compelling reason or an anticipated reward to actively perform what you just mirrored. As Albert Bandura, the architect of social learning theory, noted, learning is totally bidirectional. We learn from the environment, sure, but the environment learns and modifies thanks to our actions too. This bidirectional observation is quite literally revolutionizing technical training today. You can see these 4 steps playing out perfectly in a July 2026 study on vocational education. Online video demonstrations are totally changing how non-traditional adult learners master complex technical fields. Second-year engineering students are focusing their attention on observing expert technicians online. They're successfully retaining critical skills without even needing immediate hands-on practice. And why does this work so effectively? Because they possess massive motivation to secure competitive, high-paying jobs before they even graduate. So, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to explore in your own life. Think about all the mechanics we've discussed today, from involuntary reflexes to complex social observation. Who is an external model you watch closely online, and how has observing them fundamentally reprogrammed the way you perform your own skills? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack the fascinating mechanics of human behavior.